I'm Don.
And hi, I'm Cindy, and welcome to Pearls of Liberty, October 29th, 2011. We are at home for a change this weekend, and back to our what used to be our normal format. We're sometimes at the new normal now with something a little different, but we did have some topics this week. Actually, quite a few. There's so much going on, it's kind of hard to keep everything straight at times. But Occupy Wall Street is still very much in the news, and it's very much a focus for us because we live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and Oakland is experiencing some distress. There was a young man, 24 years old, who was a Marine veteran who was protesting in Oakland and was hit in the head. Different accounts have a different story. I've heard that he was shot with a rubber bullet, and I've heard that he was hit with a tear gas canister. So either way, he's in critical condition. That is.
I think it's been moved from critical to stable, and but the latest news is really sad in that the doctors have said that he's lost the ability to speak due to brain damage.
Oh, wow.
So that we were just thinking that maybe the trauma had taken away the ability to speak. Well, that was one of the first things we heard about it. But apparently that's brain damage that unless he recovers, that's going to be permanent. This is really, really sad. This is a man who's fought in Iraq for freedom for the Iraqi people. I mean, I know that that's not necessarily what the corporate truth of what the Iraq War was about, but I know that our soldiers over there were fighting to free the Iraqi people, and here he is trying to demonstrate for the people in his own country, and he's hit in the head with a tear gas canister, and he's maybe disabled for the rest of his life. So very, very sad.
Yeah, so if you're a praying person, and even if you're not, maybe you can pray for him.
Scott Olson.
One thing that this has really sparked in me is a memory of Kent State in the 70s, and when the students were killed. I grew up in Ohio, and when that was happening, I didn't really understand what it was that was happening. But now, looking back, it's devastating, and I've noticed in this country everybody screams when students get shot at in Tiananmen Square, or a tank runs over them, or whatever it was that happened in China. We have the same kind of strong police response in this country, and our government is so hypocritical. The very things that that our government uses as an excuse to invade another country are done by our government, by our police forces, and it's very disheartening.
Yeah, I actually saw one tweet fly by. I didn't have a chance to pursue it, and I don't know if there was I don't think there was a link, but that the protesters in Egypt, who are now living under worse tyranny than before, were standing in solidarity with the protesters that occupy Oakland. So again, I don't know if that's true or not, but that kind of tells you that this movement toward liberty is a global thing. It really is something rising in the heart of mankind, where we're seeing this fascist dictatorship take hold and try to disguise itself in various ways, but people are rising up and people are saying no. One of the most encouraging things I saw this week, toward the end of the week, was that there's a nationwide group forming of Marines dedicated to protecting protesters, and I've seen a few instances of that, or people that are private citizens that are in Arizona arming to protect the protesters. But this is just so encouraging, where you have either Marines shouting from the sidelines, or you have people that are holding AK-47s and saying that we will defend these protesters' rights. And to me, that's really what needs to happen here. And the police are being sold a bill of goods too. So they're being told all kinds of things about the protesters that aren't true. And it's very, very easy to demonize the protesters and or overly glorify them. It's a mix, as is anything. But I think that we need to realize that this is a groundswell. This is, maybe they wanted to co-opt it in the beginning. Maybe they're still trying to co-opt it. They probably still will. But the less co-optable it gets, the less press it gets. So as you're seeing it die off, that doesn't mean it's not happening. I haven't personally been to any one of the Occupy events, but the reports on the ground I've seen often do. They can portray a mix. They can, if you want to show ignorance, you can show ignorance. But if you want to show dedicated people with their hearts that really, really want America back, you can find that too. So this is, I would say it's not totally dissimilar to something like the Boston Massacre, so-called, in 1775, when, right immediately prior to the American Revolution, when you had this confrontation between a mob in Boston and throwing rocks and sticks and with shells in it, sharp objects at the soldiers, and then somebody fired, and then it was bedlam after that. We haven't had an event of that magnitude happen, but the Scott Olson thing is fairly similar, where you really say, okay, this is pretty serious now, and where you have Occupy events looking like a war zone. It isn't quite, but you do have rubber bullets flying. That's pretty bad. That people can get injured very, very badly with those. So things are definitely heating up, but I'm not saying that it's good that they're heating up, but just that people need to take a look inside and see what you really stand for. And I would not say that it's wise to always say we've got to support the police and the military, because there are growing signs that the United States has become very militaristic. And I am encouraged, though, when I see former military within the ranks of the protesters. To me, that's a very good sign, or defending the protesters. So that's encouraging.
Well, that's great. And considering the challenges to our freedoms with police reacting to protesters and so forth, Don mentioned to me that the Google takedown orders from the government asking Google or requiring Google to take things down from their searches, or the website altogether. How does that work?
Websites, and I think that includes Yahoo accounts, etc. So, and that's not saying that the Google, Yahoo, I mean not Yahoo, YouTube complied with all of those requests. They didn't, but the pressure is increasing to take down videos and websites that are unfriendly to the government, and that's the reason that is being given to some of them, is that it paints the government in a bad light. So we don't want to give any credence to that kind of so-called logic to try to silence people. We do have freedom of speech in this country, and when that's gone, everything's gone. So we need to be able to have dissenting opinions, even if we think they're wild and crazy out there. If there's a legal case for slander, that's one thing, but if there's differing opinions, well, that's quite another. And American politics has always been heated, and that's a good thing in a land where there's freedom. The debate needs to get outside of this fake left versus right, and there's no better place, no place where that's happening more than the internet and YouTube, and places where people are exchanging ideas freely. That's what the websites like YouTube use to draw people, is this exchange of ideas. That's what people are hungry for. That's popular. And if we have this clamping down, it's going to be bad news all around.
So the criteria is mostly anti-government. Although, if you happen to have websites or YouTube videos, be very careful about your copyright issues, because I've heard Alex Jones say that they're using copyright as an excuse to shut down a lot of websites. So just go the extra mile do your own images. If you can't do your own images, just whatever you use, change it 20%. You could change a photo into, if you Photoshop, into a watercolor. There are a lot of ways to alter images a little bit, change the colors a bit, or start from scratch and do your own, but be careful about that. Be careful about challenging YouTube. I've gotten a lot of notices from YouTube that it's possible that something that I've done has some music that's copyrighted by someone else. I always use iTunes or the iMovie or GarageBand, the freebies that come with those programs. So, with very few exceptions. So I know for a fact that the videos that they've said that to me about are clean. However, I do not challenge them, because if you challenge YouTube and you are wrong, they can shut down your entire channel.
Isn't that kind of like Clue or something, where if you're wrong, you're out?
It is. It is like, if you're wrong, they can. I've heard that you can have 3 strikes, but if they want to, they can take you down the first time. If you can't prove that you did not.
Now, we can talk about this, but one of the very interesting things that I heard Alex mention, it, and I sometimes listen twice because I'm distracted some part of the day and I can have more focus later, so I'll listen to some portion twice. And I didn't pick this up until the second time around, but he said literally, I'm putting Google on notice, or he might have said YouTube, but I think it was Google. That. And what he said was that they're in violation of their contract when they say that this is a free exchange, and then they renege on that contract by putting in conditions that weren't in the original contract. And it led me to think that he might actually begin to take some legal action there. And we do need pushback. We need people to say, people with some muscle and some a lot of internet clout like Alex Jones has, to be able to say, in a court of law, you can't do that. That's a violation of contract. Because people come up easily with this, because they're a corporation, they can do whatever they want. Well, no, they can't, because they're contracted with you. You're providing them with the content that's the draw for their site that makes them popular, and they need you, and they can't violate that contract without impunity.
Absolutely. When I heard Alex say that, and when I heard it, I thought I was listening to Ken Cousins or somebody from the Republic who knows all about that sort of thing. Another topic that Don wanted to discuss this week, and it is on everyone's mind still, is Iraq. Evidently, Obama's talking about withdrawing from Iraq. Could that be possible?
Well, that's what he's saying, and that this is by the, I don't know, what is it, by the end of the year, really? Anyway, I'm not sure exactly what the deadline is, but it's almost sure not to happen. And at least if it happens, it'll be something on paper that, you know, how they can easily change the number of deployment from being actual troops to being contractors or mercenaries. They can easily do that, so they might not actually even change the number. They'll do whatever they need to hold the ground. Or, here's another possibility that military mind Joel Skousen threw out, is that they might actually withdraw so that there can be some, so that they'll take some hits on purpose, and then they'll have to go in as an excuse to go back in and show force and increase the power in the region and be right up against the border of Iran. As we know, those nations border each other, so how convenient would it be to have some kind of an incident near the border with Iran and to give you the justification of amassing troops there? So I don't rule that out. And it's all political theater, though. I think that's a big part of the reason is Obama wants to look like the Peace Prize nominee, and he's thrown out justifications of why, with Libya, why this is a great thing, and that this is a wonderful military thing for the United States.
It does seem like there are a lot of wag the dog kind of things going on. It is really difficult to know what to focus on, and I don't want to really get into it, but Fast and Furious has kind of fallen by the wayside. There was an intent to appoint a special prosecutor a couple weeks ago, and our friend was looking online for articles about Fast and Furious, and the most recent one she could find was from October, I think she said 20th. So that hot potato has kind of been dropped, and it's difficult to know where to look to see. It's difficult to know what's a diversion and what's the real issue. But obviously things are still going on in Libya. So would you like to comment about what's happening in Libya?
Sure. This was a huge week of big news, with Gaddafi being taken out and killed as he was attempting to surrender. And this is a war crime. I'm sorry, that is pure and simple. It's coming out with white flags after daybreak, so there'd be no confusion. And his last words were "Don't shoot me, don't shoot me." So this is the brutal mad dog of Africa who has given his people free health care, and government buys 50% of the cars and gives newlyweds something like $10,000 to buy a house, or this is a horrible, horrible person. So anyway, Gaddafi is not what. Don't believe the press that says that he's this horrible person. Yeah, it wasn't a democracy, but he was really trying to build up his country, and did build many things up, and that have been lost and bombed, and now Al-Qaeda literally is in control of Libya. So this is the wonderful thing that Obama is saying. This is really a triumph of the American military, and this is what we should be trying to accomplish in other places of the world. This is a great bang for your buck. And just a couple of years ago, he was shaking hands with this guy. What changed? We've got to keep this forefront in our minds. The key thing that will make you an enemy of the Anglo-American banking empire quicker than anything else is trying to be financially independent. And that's what Gaddafi was doing. He was trying to, and was implementing, a gold-backed currency for use not only in Libya but also in other nations of Africa. And he was promoting that and advancing that and doing whatever he could to liberate Libya and Africa from the banking cartel. Now, he wasn't altogether completely savvy that way. He had many investment entanglements in the Western nations that were able to tie him down and drag him down. But he was actually trying to do something good, but was challenging the global banking system. And that's ultimately what got him killed, and what got the advancements in Libya bombed.
Evidently, we can't take anything for granted. We can't make any assumptions that anything that we hear is, at least from the mainstream media, is completely true. And we need to get in the habit of kind of popping the hood on everything and not accepting the story that's on the surface.
Yep.
A story that, did you have something else?
Well, just a good example of that, transitioning to the next topic, is the debates, the presidential debates, and all of the campaigning that's beginning to ratchet up, and just what a propaganda piece that is for the media. How obvious it is that the candidate that they're trying to sell is the one who gets the softball question in the beginning, and the one who consistently gets the least amount of airtime is Ron Paul. So it's one of the things that is happening is there's talk of candidates arranging debates among themselves to promote themselves. One person who just isn't getting any traction, for a good reason, is Newt Gingrich, and conservatives see through him now. So he's trying to arrange a debate with
Herman Cain.
Herman Cain, and Whether or not that happens, I don't know, but it's interesting because they're trying to get the spotlight on themselves, and if it doesn't work for Gingrich, then Kaine will get the will look good. So Kaine's trying to campaign less, so he doesn't have any gaffes and exposure that might cast him in bad light. I can't remember what it was specifically this week, but there was something that didn't work too well for him. So they're trying to control their own press, and that is obviously to the exclusion of the candidates that aren't involved in these candidate self-promoting debates, like Ron Paul. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. But keep in mind that these debates really are not true debates. They are propaganda. If you want to know what really the candidates stand for, you've got to do your own research. Go on, dig on the internet if you want to see them in front of a camera in both the good and the bad. Go to YouTube and you'll find plenty of clips on everyone. So, and there's a ton of information on Ron Paul that you won't find in the mainstream media.
You have to be willing to go after the information yourself. And I believe that you also wanted to comment on what's happening with the EU, with the Euro.
There's actually a financial deal going down right now, and I don't know all the details of it, but I just want to hit the highlights because it's important. The economy of Europe is so linked to the United States. The investors in the Greek economy have been asked to take a haircut, meaning they're going to get a lower return on the bonds that they've used to finance, and that supposedly is intended to satisfy the people who see less profit going to these mega bankers, and everybody's supposed to be happy about that, but it's not really flying very well. And the key thing that I want to highlight here is that the globalists are destroying the sovereignty of individual countries, creating interdependencies, and once they've done that, then they'll collapse the whole thing. So the EU as a currency don't think that it's a good thing if it collapses and think that, oh, the globalists won't be able to have their grand unified Europe. They want to purposely implode that currency so that they can bring in another layer. They'll do that when they're ready. Now, I don't know that the next thing that they try to do with a global currency or SDR, strategic drawing rights, is going to work as well as they want it to. I don't think anything is really going all that well for them, but don't be naive either and think that just because the EU doesn't fly, it's designed to implode. The way that these guys think constantly is order out of chaos, and they create the chaos. So create the problem in secret, offer the solution, pose as the savior, and that's what they're intending to do with the EU, to bring in a financial dictatorship.
So many people seem to be becoming aware of that. Hopefully it won't work a whole lot longer, but one way that the system is getting backed up is that the Pope this week was encouraging people that a global government is good, and that we need a central bank. So is this the woman riding on the beast, or do we not even want to get into that part of it?
Oh, sure. This happened early in the week on Monday, that the Pope called for a global central bank. And so really, yeah, it's the Revelation 17, the woman riding on the beast, and the great harlot, and all of that. So there it is. It's happening right before our eyes, and people can find all kinds of reasons not to see it, but I don't know, it's pretty clear.
So the church is the woman, and the beast is the one world government, right?
A beast in Scripture always symbolizes a country or a nation, so yeah.
I think when we've mentioned before what a great primer Godfather 3 is on the corruption in the church, and it was kind of surprising. The first time I saw that, I was a little taken aback, because here's the mafia that wants to get involved in the papal bank and the bank of the Vatican Bank, and they have this plan to have this company and make a bunch of money, and the Vatican Bank is so corrupt that the mafia gets swindled.
Michael Corleone has this reaction like, "Oh man, I've been playing with amateurs up until now, and these guys are the real deal."
He's completely unprepared with as vicious and violent and deceptive men as he was accustomed to. So
Yeah.
we're not criticizing Catholics. I mean, we both know that there are a lot of Catholic people who have sincere faith in Christ and love God sincerely from their hearts. So it's not about Catholics. It's about the system having gotten into the church, and that is not unique to Catholics. That's common with Protestants as well.
Yeah.
Something that we've been thinking about a lot.
One of my favorite books is In God's Name by David Yallop, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list in the 80s sometime, and it's about the murder of Pope John Paul I, because he wanted to give away the wealth of the church, and that wasn't widely known, but the researchers found that out, and he lasted 30 days till they killed him.
And there is a tremendous amount of wealth wrapped up in just the real estate alone. And I believe that we've mentioned before about Pope Innocent, who convinced King John, I think it was John I, that he had somehow committed the unpardonable sin, or for some reason was unworthy of going to heaven. And Pope Innocent convinced John in 1213 that he needed to sign over England and his own self, his lands, his people, all future holdings of the country of England, and virtually the entire world to the Vatican, so that he could save his own soul. Now, of course, question, did he have authority to do that? Possibly. Even if he did, it was a contract entered into through fraud. Had he known the scriptures better, he would have realized that he didn't need to deal with a pope for his soul, that he could communicate directly with God, and that problem solved. And that was the reason they demanded the Magna Carta in 1215, wasn't it?
Right, absolutely. So you actually have people saying that the Magna Carta is no longer in force, and you've got this huge rift between these forces of tyranny that have been operating for centuries, trying to do everything that they could to get power back from the hands of the people, and you've got willing accomplices that will sell their soul for anything to be able to have a little temporal power, and the battle is on. We live in amazing times. Here's that book I was talking about, In God's Name, David Yallop, and it's an exciting read, very well researched, and people don't know this stuff. People need to know what really happened.
On a somewhat lighter note, although we do take this seriously as well. But Don was telling me that there are raw milk spies who are going out and trying to catch people who are selling raw milk.
Raw milk is so incredibly dangerous that the government is training spies to infiltrate these horrible raw milk producers so that they can expose them, and that people will not be endangered by this horrible raw milk that people might get if these spies didn't expose them. So the way that it's usually women that are trained to say, my baby's going to die if he doesn't get raw goat's milk because I can't produce the milk and the baby's allergic to formula. Oh, please, please, please give me the milk. Bam, busted. So then the SWAT teams arrive. It's crazy. So why is raw milk such a threat? I think it's on two levels. It's really, really good for your body because the pasteurization kills the enzymes and make the milk so that it can't be digested. The enzymes need to be alive and in the milk in order for this very healthy food to be digested. The pasteurized milk is really just like glue. It's not good for your body. And raw milk is very healthy for you, and it's also operating on the level of people and networks supporting one another at the grassroots agricultural level, and that's a huge threat to the globalists. They want to be able to control production of all things that humans live on, and I don't even have time right now to go into Monsanto and all of that, but the raw milk is that same type of thing, where if people could be self-sufficient and help one another, support one another, they can't build these huge networks of control where they control the food that goes into your body. And that's a big part of what the control freaks want to do in order to be able to manage their livestock.
Well, I think in theory, if you had a garden and a few goats, very few goats, you pretty much can be self-sustaining. I believe that the Garbage Warrior houses had goats. Part of that plan was to have a goat in the yard. And I've thought a lot about lawns. Before there were lawn mowers, I'm guessing that the people in the large manor houses had sheep and herds of sheep and goats that kept their lawns, their grass down. Is that? Mm-hmm. That's a reasonable assumption. So if you have a piece of property that's big enough, get a goat or a sheep, and you don't have to mow your lawn anymore.
If you're going to play tennis on it or something, and you need to make sure that you have somebody go around and clean up the droppings first, otherwise it could be real problems.
Well, we do have one more topic that is somewhat serious. Actually, if it happened to you, it would feel very serious. The Tennessee TSA checkpoints. They are randomly stopping cars, not even randomly, they have checkpoints and everybody's supposed to stop. I can't imagine letting them go through my car. I think if I knew there was a checkpoint, I'd get off the freeway and go around and then get back on the freeway somewhere down the road, because it's such an unbelievable intrusion and so completely unconstitutional.
I think that we don't really realize something like this is possible until it starts happening. I was really interested to hear Alex Jones describe his conversation with Jesse Ventura, in which Jesse said, no, that couldn't happen, not in America. And then he had to face the truth that it really was happening, and then had to deal with what he would do, because now he's not flying, so he's driving, so he realizes it could happen to him. And he said, I'm just driving through. He's not going to stop. And we have to stop being intimidated. There comes a point where people have to say, no, this papers, please stuff is Nazi Germany, and if we let ourselves go there, we've lost America. We just can't let that happen. There have to be people that resist this stuff. This whole idea, and this is another thing I want to talk about just briefly, mention again, we've talked about it before, this whole idea of that to be a good Christian you obey the government is such baloney. We serve a higher God, and all through the Bible there is civil disobedience. There are tyrants that need to be disobeyed in order to obey God. And we're coming to those times in America where we will need to exercise civil disobedience in order to be obedient to God. And checkpoints may very well be one of those issues.
Well, I was living in Ohio in the 90s, and I know I've mentioned this before. I lived very close to I-75, which is a north-south route that goes all the way Canada down to the bottom of Florida. And there was one summer they had random checkpoints on I-75. They would randomly pull people over, and this was, gosh, 10, 12 years ago.
Mm.
And I was surprised at the time. Nobody seemed bothered by it. That was long before I was fully aware of what was going on in our government. But I knew that it's illegal search and seizure. There is no constitutional justification for a random search without a search warrant.
Yep.
Even with, the reason search warrants are required is because they have to present a reason of suspicion why you need to be searched. If you're just driving down the street, driving down the freeway, that is not, there's no reasonable suspicion there. Yeah. You're not committing any crimes. There's no indication that you're committing any crimes. So, yeah, like I said, if it happens and I'm aware of it, I will get off the freeway. If I'm caught in one, I will sit there and wait for a search warrant, and they can do whatever they want to me. And I said that in Ohio when they were doing it on I-75. If they ever stopped me, I would make them get a search warrant. And of course they could, because they would use your objection as a reasonable suspicion. I don't care. I will sit there, and they'll have to go to talk to a judge.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to mention that Chuck and Timothy Baldwin have a book out now. Previously it was just that Chuck Baldwin had a series of sermons addressing Romans 13 in a proper biblical context. Romans 13 is the scripture that Hitler used to convince everyone that they needed to obey the government, and often Christians today are falling into that misconception. So there's a book out now. I'm sure if you just search Chuck Baldwin or Timothy Baldwin and the truth about Romans 13, forget the exact book title, but just Romans 13 and Baldwin, and you'll be able to find that book. And I intend to get it, and it's information that's badly needed today.
Teach your kids about their rights as an American citizen. Mm-hmm. Don't rely on schools to be telling them that they have rights, because it's not happening anymore. I knew that it was the illegal search and seizure was illegal because I had learned that. Teach your kids what the Constitution says and prepare them for a future where people are going to be trying to take away their rights. We have no interview with Dr. Noah this week. He and we have been working very hard to put together Dr. U videos and ebooks, so we're hoping that you've had the opportunity to check out that website. We did watch some movies that are not worth mentioning, mm-hmm. but we saw a couple that are worth mentioning. I saw one by myself that was called Hungry Hill. It's from 1948. It's somewhat interesting. It's an old black and white movie, and the plot is, it jumps around a lot. But the basic premise is the conflict between an Irishman who is, I didn't say, but I believe he's probably Orange Irish, probably Protestant Irish, came in with a lot of money and bought a lot of property in the community and dug a mine and employed the people who had owned the land previously. So there were constant conflicts, and it's kind of an interesting film about, it's almost a side plot, the conflict between the labor and the business owner. But it's interesting, and it's just to see the concepts and how people perceived that kind of a conflict in the 40s. We also watched The Great Train Robbery.
I wouldn't say it's worth a lot of time, although it's just an enjoyable movie. But the end is what interested me. At the very end, you had Sean Connery, who plays the guy that got caught in the robbery, that masterminded this robbery of a train with a whole bunch of gold on it. And in the end, I'm giving away the movie, but hey, it's been out there for a while, so hey, if you didn't know already. he escapes immediately after his trial, and the crowd cheers as he's escaping. Why would they do that? The magistrate was just telling him how important it was for a civil society to obey the laws, and why was he such an evil lawbreaker, and then he has a way that he escapes and the people cheer. Well, the people knew back then that the power structure was evil and oppressive, and they knew that he was just one of them. He was trying to do something that would enable him to break free of the power structure. And you have that popular view at other times in history too. Even the bank robberies in the 30s and the Depression era, they knew that the banks were the cause of the financial oppression that the people were under. And I think that's starting to rise again with Occupy Wall Street. It's not real clear, not real focused, but you see that awareness beginning to shift and beginning to happen again. And that gives me encouragement, because at times I think that, people just think you need to pay this debt. Well, there is a tremendous amount of fraudulent debt and a tremendous amount of fraudulent mortgages. And in fact, you could make a case that all of them are, because of the way that it was done, really was not legal. So it's encouraging to me to see the popular view shift to recognize that there really are people that are enslaving other humans through the use of money. And the end of that great train robbery showed that.
You mentioned civilization, or you mentioned civil behavior. Do you want to enlarge a little bit on where the idea of civilization originated and how it ties back?
Well, I'm not Ken Cousins, but Civilis, there was a guy named Civilis, I think, and it comes from Rome and the Roman culture. And civil law is built upon, comes on top of common law. So to have a civil society is one in which civil law is used to regulate commerce and regulate all of our interactions. And that's not entirely a good thing, because when the emphasis is on civil law rather than common law, you get all kinds of regulations that can become very burdensome, and also you can have punishments that don't make sense. There is no sure remedy in civil law like there is in common law, and in civil law you can often, when that becomes the predominant force of law in a society like it is in ours today, the common sense aspects of common law become hidden and avoided, and you don't really have that sense of justice like you have in a simpler society. So in many ways, what we're experiencing now in the way of the growth of tyranny is the old Roman model that just dressed up and using civil law in order to impose a tyranny.
Our education, I graduated from high school in 1974, so that gives you an idea of the era that I was in school. And our world history was pretty much all about Rome. It mentioned Greece, and this was the inception, what was considered the inception of culture. Greece was mentioned. Babylon may have been vaguely alluded to, but I don't really remember that. Rome was heavily emphasized, and then the culture, what was considered world history, went from Rome, Italy, up into Europe. And what was called world history when I was in school was pretty much Roman and European history.
Mm-hmm.
Very little, if anything, about Asia. Some of the great cultures and societies, like Babylon, though Babylon was unholy. If you read the book of Revelation, I'm not lifting Babylon up. However, that was where our numeral system came from. I think in considering world history, it needs to be acknowledged. And there were many great cultures that were pretty much left out of our education. And the emphasis was on Rome. And our civil code comes to us in California, and probably your state too, through New York. And the New York civil code completely based on the Roman civil code.
The Empire State, New York. And the empire that's
Right.
being referred to in that nickname is the Roman Empire.
That's right.
And that's why it's called that.
So, little history lesson. Hope we didn't bore you. Maybe we'll cut this out and leave it in a separate video. But we do appreciate you joining us this week. And do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to add?
Fight for liberty, whatever that means
Fight
to
for
you.
liberty, and if you go to Oakland, be careful. Take care.